He pulled her out of the dirt during a dust storm and rode away before she could even say thank you. She tracked him for 5 days across the plains of North Texas just to pay him back. He said he didn't need anything. She said she needed to pay her debts. Neither of them had any idea that a handshake over a plate of fried chicken was about to become the beginning of the only thing either of them had stopped believing in: hope. This channel is where the Old West lives on, in stories of stubborn cowboys and stronger women, of love that surprises you when you've stopped looking for it, of mothers and children and the unbreakable bonds between people who choose each other through the worst of times. What this story teaches us: sometimes the debt you think you're repaying is actually the universe leading you exactly where you were always meant to be. Hit like if this story pulled you in. Subscribe so you're always first to hear the next one. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are real. And leave a comment below. I read every single one.
Clara had seen her share of sorry kitchens, but this one was in a class all its own. The whole cookhouse had the smell of pure defeat. Stale coffee, spoiled lard, and a heavy air she knew all too well, the scent of men who had long ago stopped hoping for anything better. A layer of flour dust covered nearly every surface. The old stove looked like it had not seen a proper cleaning since the war. Rusty pots dangled from hooks, their handles eaten through with corrosion. She placed her small traveling bag on the one clean patch of floor she could find, and immediately rolled up her sleeves. "Ma'am, I sure would not stick my hands in that sink if I were you." The warning came from a young cowboy propped against the doorframe. He could not have been more than 20, with eyes that had seen too much sun and not nearly enough kindness. His shirt had patches on both elbows. "What is your name?" Clara asked, her eyes still fixed on the counter. She was wrestling with a wet rag. "Tommy Birch, ma'am." "Well, Tommy Birch, you can either pitch in and help me, or you can get out of my way." He stayed right where he was. "The boss said you have got 3 hours. The boys are already making jokes. Let them joke." Clara located a bucket, worked the pump handle until water flowed, and began to fill it. "I have been laughed at by better men than them." Tommy shifted his boots on the floorboards. "You truly believe you can whip up something in this pigsty that will make Ethan Calloway decide to let you stay?" She finally turned and looked him square in the eye. "I am not trying to stay. I'm trying to settle what I owe." "For what? For dragging you out from under a busted wagon? For remembering I was a person worth dragging out?" That quieted him down for a good long while. Clara had made it to Red Hollow 3 hours after noon. She had been searching for the quiet cowboy who saved her life just outside of Wichita Falls, right in the middle of a dust storm that had made the day as dark as night. She was riding with a merchant wagon, not really headed anywhere special, when the wind came up like a fist out of the sky. The wagon flipped clean over. The driver took off running. She was trapped under one of the heavy wheels, with her lungs full of dirt, when a pair of strong hands lifted the crushing weight off of her. By the time she could draw a full breath, the man was already on his horse and riding off. The merchant told her what he knew. That was Ethan Calloway. "He owns the Red Hollow Ranch about 40 miles north of here. He lost his wife 3 years ago. The man does not say much. And he surely does not stick around to be thanked." Clara had then spent a solid week asking about him in every little town between Wichita Falls and the Red River. The stories were all pretty much the same. Calloway was a hard man, but he was honest. His ranch was on its last legs. No cook ever stayed for more than a week. The whole place felt like it had a dark cloud hanging over it, almost like a curse. She was not worried about any curses. She was worried about her debts. When she finally arrived at the ranch house on foot, splattered with mud and bone-tired, Ethan was busy mending a fence post. He stared at her for a moment, trying to place where he had seen her face before. "You pulled me out from under a wagon," she had said. 5 nights back, during that big storm outside of Wichita Falls." He slammed the hammer against the post 2 more times. "That was you. I am here to repay you. I do not need repaying. I do." It was then that he stopped his work and truly looked at her. His eyes were the color of a winter sky just before it snows, cold and far away. "You have any money?" "No." "Then you do not have a thing I need." Clara pulled her shoulders back. "I can cook. Let me cook one supper tonight. If your men refuse to eat it, I will be gone before the sun comes up. But I will pay my debts, Mr. Calloway, one way or another." He watched her for a long, silent moment, and she saw just a flicker of something cross his face. It was not hope, not really, but maybe it was curiosity about what kind of woman would travel for 5 days just to fix a meal for a bunch of strangers. 3 hours, he finally said in a low voice. "Supper's at 6 o'clock. If the boys spit it out, you are gone." And now, there she stood in his train wreck of a kitchen, with Tommy Birch staring at her like she had just grown a second head. "You are really planning to cook in here?" Tommy asked again. "I am planning to clean first, and then I am going to cook. Are you going to help, or are you just going to stand there and pass judgment?" He pushed himself off the doorframe. "What do you need?" "Hot water. As much as you can haul. And I need you to find me the oldest cowboy on this entire ranch. I need someone who can remember what used to be in this kitchen before it all went to ruin." A slow grin spread across Tommy's face. "That would have to be Charlie Moss. He has been on this land since before Ethan's father passed away. Go get him." As Tommy hurried off, Clara sized up the battlefield before her. She had 3 hours to pull off a miracle using ingredients she had yet to find and tools that looked like they might give her lockjaw. Most women would have turned and walked right out the door. But Clara Whitmore had not walked away from much in her 31 years, and she was not about to start now. She went after the stove first, scraping away layers of old, built-up grease and tossing it into a bucket. Her hands began to sting, but she did not let up. Charlie Moss showed up a few minutes later, smelling of horse and chewing tobacco. He squinted at her like she might be a ghost. "Tommy tells me you are looking for the old inventory list," he said, his voice raspy like gravel shaking in a tin can. "I need to know what is here, what is still good to eat, and what has been forgotten." Charlie tugged at his white beard. "Well now, there are some dried peaches up in the attic. Mrs. Calloway, the first one, Ethan's mother, she used to put them up there every year. They are probably still all right if the mice have not gotten to them. What else is there? The root cellar should have potatoes, carrots, and onions, assuming they have not all rotted through. The smokehouse has got some beef bones. The boys these days do not mess with bones. They just want the meat. The flour bin is fresh. We got a new delivery last week. There is buttermilk in the cold box, but it has likely gone sour by now." Clara paused and wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. "That buttermilk had better not be sour. I am going to need it." Charlie's eyes got real narrow. "You are making fried chicken?" "I am, if I can get this stove hot enough to cook on and find some oil that has not gone bad." The old cowboy's entire expression softened. "We have not had any decent fried chicken around here since—" He let his words trail off. "Since when?" "Since Ethan's wife passed away. She always made it on Sundays. The whole ranch used to smell like a little piece of heaven." Clara looked him right in the eye. "Then let us make it smell like heaven one more time." Charlie turned and left, only to return with another ranch hand. This one was a younger Mexican man with gentle hands and cautious eyes. "This here is Miguel. He is the best man we have with a fire. He will get your stove burning just right." Miguel gave a single respectful nod. "Señora. Clara. Just call me Clara." In less than 30 minutes, that kitchen was buzzing with more life than it had seen in years. Miguel managed to coax a steady, hot flame from the old stove. Tommy hauled bucket after bucket of water until his shirt was completely soaked. Charlie came down from the attic holding 2 dusty jars of dried peaches that were perfectly preserved. Another cowboy, who did not bother to give his name, brought up a load of vegetables from the dark root cellar. Clara moved through the chaos like a woman on a mission. She checked the buttermilk. It was still good. She set it aside with a generous amount of cracked black pepper and salt to make a brine for the chicken. She sifted through the flour, found a bag of cornmeal, and started to mix up a batter for skillet cornbread. She sent Tommy straight to the smokehouse to gather up every last beef bone he could find. "And do not you come back unless you have at least a dozen of them." Are we fixing to feed an army? Tommy hollered back. No, we are fixing to feed hungry men. There is a big difference. While the bones were in the oven roasting to bring out their flavor, Clara chopped up potatoes and carrots with a knife she had to sharpen on her own. The steel blade sang as it slid across the wet stone. Her hands fell into a familiar rhythm, one they had learned in a dozen different kitchens, a dozen different lives before she ended up here. She did not bother to tell these cowboys that she had cooked in lumber camps and dusty mining towns. She did not tell them she had fed crews of railroad workers and ranch hands all the way from Montana down to Mexico. She did not need to tell them that food was the only language she had ever known how to speak with any real grace. You never have to tell men your life story. You just have to feed them. The chicken pieces went into the buttermilk brine to soak. Then she dredged each one in seasoned flour with black pepper, salt, and just a tiny hint of cayenne pepper. The lard in the big skillet popped and sizzled when the first piece of chicken hit it, and a delicious smell started to spread through the kitchen like a long-awaited promise. Charlie stopped dead in the doorway and just took a deep breath. Lord have mercy, he whispered to himself. Miguel quickly made the sign of the cross over his chest. Tommy just stood there, completely mesmerized. It smells like, I do not even know what that smells like. It smells like somebody finally gives a damn, Clara said, as she flipped a piece of chicken with a pair of tongs she had dug out from under a pile of old rags. Now all of you get out of my kitchen before you drip sweat in my supper. They scattered like quail. She finished her work alone, which was how she liked it best. The cornbread batter was poured into a heavy cast-iron skillet, and it bubbled up around the edges as it hit the hot pan. The beef bones simmered away in a pot big enough to bathe a small child, slowly giving up all the richness they held inside. She added the onions, carrots, and potatoes along with salt and pepper. She even found an old jar with a single bay leaf inside and dropped it in. The peach cobbler was the last thing she made. She soaked the dried fruit in hot water to soften it up, then mixed it with sugar, cinnamon, and butter. She rolled out a biscuit dough for the top, her hands moving on their own, guided by a memory deep in her muscles. The sun was just starting to set when the kitchen door swung open again. Ethan Calloway stood there, and just behind him, she could see all 16 of his men gathering like a silent jury. He looked all around the room. The kitchen was a whole new world with counters scrubbed clean, shelves put right, and pots bubbling on the stove like they had stories to tell. His face was a stone mask, but something shifted in his eyes. You had 3 hours, he said flatly. And I used every minute, I replied. The boys are hungry. Then let us feed them. Clara had already laid out the long table in the ranch dining hall. She had found and washed the plates, polished the forks, and scrubbed the cups herself. There were no fancy centerpieces or flowers, just clean plates and food that promised to taste like home. The cowboys ambled in, their faces suspicious, and their boots quiet on the floorboards. They took their seats like they were expecting a plate full of trouble. Clara brought the chicken out first, golden brown and crispy, still sizzling from the pan. Next came the cornbread with honey she had found in the back of the pantry dripping down its sides. The beef stew arrived in a tureen big enough to feed a whole cavalry. A peach cobbler sat waiting on the sideboard. Not a soul said a word. Nobody even shifted. Ethan Calloway sat at the head of the table, his expression impossible to read. He looked at that chicken like it might just jump up and bite him. He looked at Clara like she was some kind of miracle worker. Well, she said, it is not going to eat itself. It was Charlie Moss who reached for the chicken first, his hand shaking just a little. He took a leg, sank his teeth into it, and then his eyes fluttered shut. Sweet Lord, he whispered, and just like that, the floodgates opened. 16 men fell upon that meal like they had not eaten in a month of Sundays. The chicken disappeared. The cornbread was gone in a flash. The stew pot was emptied so fast, Clara barely had a moment to bring the refill from the kitchen. All the while, Ethan had not so much as touched his fork to his plate. Clara walked over and stood right beside his chair. You said if the men did not like it, I would have to leave. Well, he finally picked up his fork and cut into a piece of the chicken. The crispy skin cracked under the pressure. The meat inside was snow-white and tender, with steam rising from it. He took a bite. The room fell silent again, every man holding his breath. Ethan chewed with purpose, swallowed, and put his fork down. Then he picked it right back up and took another bite. "Eat," he said to the man, his voice all gravel. And for the first time in 3 long years, Red Hollow Ranch was filled with a sound it had all but forgotten. Laughter. Tommy told a funny story about a horse. Miguel started a friendly argument with Charlie about the right way to fix a fence. Another cowboy, whose name Clara learned was Pete, asked for a second helping and then a third. When the cobbler was served, grown men squabbled over the last bite like a bunch of schoolboys. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway just watching. This was the real reason she loved to cook. It was not just about the food, but for this right here. This was the moment when folks remembered they were people, not just hands to be fed. It was when a simple table turned into a place for family instead of just a feeding trough. It was when a ranch house finally started to feel like a proper home again. Ethan found her standing there after the men had all gone, their bellies full and their spirits high. "You can stay," he told her, plain and simple. Clara just shook her head. "I said 1 meal. I said I would work off my debt. It is all paid up. I will be on my way in the morning." He took a step closer to her. She could smell the scent of horses and worn leather on him. And something else, too. It was a deep sadness that had soaked right into him like rain after a long dry spell. "What if I offered you a job? I am not looking for work." Or, "What is it you are looking for, then?" She finally met his gaze. Those eyes of his were like a winter sky, holding far too much sorrow and not nearly enough hope. "I am just looking for the next place that needs me. That is all I have ever been looking for. This place needs you." "For how long? A week? Maybe 2? "I have seen how this story goes, Mr. Calloway. The men get all excited about good food, and then they get used to it, and then they start making demands, and then they turn mean. I have been run off of more ranches than you have got cattle in your fields. Not this one. You do not know that. I know those men have not laughed like that in 3 years. I know Charlie Moss just told me he would up and quit if you left. I know 16 tough ranch hands just ate peach cobbler and asked for the recipe like they were going to write a letter home to their mothers." He stopped for a moment. "I know I just tasted something that reminded me that I am still drawing breath." A lump formed in Clara's throat. "That is just food. It is not some kind of magic." "Maybe not," he said, "but it is something. And something is a whole lot more than what we have had around here." She wanted to argue with him. She wanted to tell him she had heard all these pretty promises before from ranch bosses and foremen and wagon masters who all swore she was a godsend right up until the day they decided she was not. But there was something in Ethan Calloway's face that made the words die in her throat. It was not desperation, and it was not him trying to trick her. It was just a simple, honest need. 1 week, she heard her own voice say, "I will stay for 1 week. If it works out, we can talk more. If it does not, I am gone. And you will not owe me a single thing. Deal." They shook on it. His hand was calloused and strong, while hers was dusted with flour and marked with the small scars from a life spent by the stove. Neither one of them had any idea, but that handshake was the start of something that neither of them was prepared for. It was something that would challenge them in ways that a good meal could not fix. It was something that was already stirring in the darkness just outside the ranch house, just waiting for the right time to make its move. But for right now, in this moment, with the smell of fried chicken still hanging in the air, and the happy sounds of full-bellied men drifting in from the bunkhouse, Clara Whitmore let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place that would not be so quick to cast her aside. Even if it was just for a week, even if she was just fooling herself, and even if the real trouble was still on its way. The rooster had not even cleared his throat to crow when Clara heard the sound of boots on the front porch. She had been up since 4, getting the kitchen fire going, measuring out the coffee and wondering if she had ever been this nervous about making breakfast. Through the window, she could see shadows moving over in the bunkhouse. The men were stirring, getting ready for a day of work that started long before the sun had any right to be in the sky. The kitchen door opened without so much as a knock. Ethan stood in the doorway, his hat in his hand, looking like he had not slept a wink. "I did not figure you would be up this early. A ranch does not feed itself. Neither do you." He placed something on the counter. It was a tin of real coffee, the expensive kind that came all the way from New Orleans. "I thought you might be in need of this." Clara just stared at the tin. Where did this come from? "I had it put away. Today just seemed like the right time for it. You hiding anything else in here I ought to know about?" "Plenty, but the coffee is a good start." He turned like he was about to leave, but then he stopped. "The men are going to be expecting what you gave them yesterday. Just so you are aware. I cannot fry chicken every single morning, Mr. Calloway. The name is Ethan, and I am not asking you to. I'm just giving you a fair warning. You have set a new standard around here." He was gone before she could think of a reply. Clara opened the tin and took a deep breath of that real coffee, not the burnt chicory stuff most ranches tried to pass off. Her hands shook just a bit as she measured it into the pot. 1 meal down, 20 more to go before the week was over, no pressure at all. By the time the sun finally peeked over the horizon, she had biscuits baking in the oven, bacon sizzling in the skillet, eggs scrambled with some cheese she had found wrapped in a cloth in the ice box, a pot of gravy bubbling on the stove, and coffee strong enough to raise the dead. The cowboys came in groups. First came the early risers, then the ones who liked to sleep in, and then Charlie Moss, who moved slower than molasses in winter, but had a grin on his face as big as Texas. "It smells just like my mama's kitchen in here," he announced to the room. Tommy Birch gave him a playful nudge. "Your mama could not cook her way out of a wet paper bag, and you know it." "She could in my memory," he shot back, "and that is what matters." The dining room was even louder than it had been the day before. The men were more comfortable with each other. Clara brought out the platters of food and watched them dig in with the kind of focus folks usually save for things they are afraid might vanish. Miguel caught her eye and gave a single nod. "Muy bueno, señora. You better save your compliments until after you have tasted it." "I do not need to taste it. I can tell by the way old Charlie's eyes got all watery." "They did not," Charlie protested with his mouth full of biscuit. "They did too. I saw you wipe your face. That was just bacon grease, you lying Mexican." "Both of you just shut your mouths and eat," Pete called out from down the end of the table. Clara slipped back into the kitchen, her heart hammering in her chest harder than it should have been. 2 meals. That is all she had served them. Just 2 meals, and these men were already acting like she had been there for years instead of just a handful of hours. It should have made her feel good. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. She had learned the hard way that the higher men built you up, the harder you fell when you finally let them down. And sooner or later, she always let them down. The breakfast plates came back to the kitchen, wiped clean. Tommy hung around while she was washing the dishes. "You need any help with that? You have got cattle to look after, do you not?" "Yeah, but, well, then you should go look after them. I can handle this." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, holding his hat in his hands. "Some of the boys are making bets." Clara's hands paused in the soapy water. "On what?" "On how long you're going to last. Most of them are saying a week, maybe 2. A few of them think you will be gone before Friday." He paused. "I bet that you would stay. You should not bet money you are not willing to lose." Tommy was not betting with money. "I bet my Sunday off next month. That is a foolish bet, maybe so, but I reckon you are a whole lot tougher than—" "You look." He started for the door, then looked back at her. "Also, you better watch out for Frank Delaney. He is the big fella. Got a scar on his cheek. He has been on this ranch the longest besides Charlie, and he does not take kindly to change. I will keep that in mind." Tommy left, and Clara stood there all alone in the kitchen, with soap suds dripping from her fingertips. Frank Delaney. She had seen him at breakfast. He sat away from the others, eating his food without a word, watching her like a hawk watches a field mouse. He was a big man, probably around 40, with eyes that held the kind of anger that did not need a reason to flare up. She had run into men like Frank before. They were always the source of the trouble. By noon, Clara had scrubbed the kitchen clean from top to bottom all over again, taken a proper count of everything in the pantry, and found out that Red Hollow Ranch was about 3 weeks away from being out of flour, had no sugar at all. and was down to its last jar of canned vegetables from 2 summers ago. She found Ethan in the barn putting a new shoe on a horse. "We need supplies," she said, not bothering to beat around the bush. He did not even look up from his work. "Town is 20 miles south. We make a supply run every 2 weeks. We just went last week. Then you must have gone to the wrong stores. Either you did not buy near enough or somebody on this ranch has been stealing." Well, that sure got his attention. "Nobody steals from this place." "Then you had better explain how you are almost out of basic supplies with 16 hungry men to feed." Ethan put down the horse's hoof he was working on and stood up straight, wiping the sweat off his brow. "We are just making do with what we have got." "You cannot make do with empty flour sacks, Ethan. I will take care of it." "And when is that?" "Because supper is in 6 hours and I'm already cutting the portions way down." "I told you, I will take care of it." Clara moved in a little closer, so close she could smell the horse and the hot metal, and the frustration just rolling off of him. "You hired me to come here and cook. I cannot cook thin air. You either give me a budget to buy supplies, or you admit to me that this whole ranch is broke." The quiet between them felt as tight and sharp as a brand new barbed wire fence. "We are not broke," Ethan finally said. "We are just running lean. There is a big difference." "How lean are we talking?" "Lean enough that I cannot spare any of the hands for a trip into town for supplies until Saturday. That is 4 whole days from now. I know how to count just fine. The question is, do you know how to feed 16 grown men on nothing but good intentions and old coffee grounds?" Ethan's jaw was tight. "You told me you would stay on for a week. I guess now we will all find out if you are a woman of your word." He turned his back on her and went back to the horse, acting like she was not even there. Clara felt a fire rise up in her to argue, to tell him that she could not just pull miracles out of a hat, that cooking takes actual food, and that his stubborn pride was about to starve every man he had. But instead, she just walked back to the kitchen and got to planning. Supper that evening was beef bone soup for the 2nd night in a row, served with the very last of the good bread. The men ate it and did not say a word, but she could feel their disappointment hanging in the air, like the heavy feeling right before a big thunderstorm. Frank Delaney was the first one to speak up. "Is this not the same soup we had last night?" Clara looked him right in the eye. "Same bones, but I put different vegetables in it. Is there a problem?" "It just seems to me that a cook who boasts about paying off her debts would offer a little more variety. A cook who has food to work with offers variety. A cook who is working with nothing but scraps has to make do. Maybe you are not as good as you have been letting on." The whole table went dead quiet. Charlie Moss cleared his throat. "Now, Frank, that is about enough, is it though? We all got our hopes up for some fried chicken and a good cobbler. Instead, we are eating bone soup like we are as poor as a family of church mice." Frank shoved his bowl away from him. "I have eaten better meals than this out on a cattle drive." "Then maybe that is where you ought to be," Clara said, and her voice was as calm and cold as a winter morning. "Maybe I should. Maybe we all should before we all starve to death. Just sitting here waiting on miracles that are not ever going to show up." Ethan's voice sliced through the tension in the room like a sharp knife. "You got something you need to say to me, Frank? Then you say it to my face. Do not you dare take it out on the cook." Frank stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly on the floor. "I am just saying what every man here is already thinking, boss. You brought some woman in here to try and fix problems that cannot be fixed with a dinner plate. This whole ranch is dying. It has been dying ever since Mrs. Calloway passed away. Bringing in strays is not going to change a thing. Sit back down. I am done sitting." Frank turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him so hard it made the windows rattle. Not a single person moved. Nobody said a word. Clara could feel her face getting hot with embarrassment. "I will be gone in the morning." "You will do no such thing," Ethan said. "He is right. I cannot fix this with food. He is just angry, and angry men say foolish things." Ethan looked around at the other men at the table. "Does anybody else want to leave? The door is right there, but Clara is staying the week we agreed on. After that, what she does is her own choice." One after another, the men started eating their soup again, but the harm had been done. Clara went back into the kitchen and held onto the counter, trying to fight back tears that she refused to let anybody see. This was the exact reason she never stayed in one place for too long. This was why she always kept on moving. Because in the end, they always found a way to turn on you. They always blamed you for the problems that were there long before you ever showed up. He is just scared. She turned around and saw Miguel standing there in the doorway. Frank, he went on, he is scared that this ranch is going to go under. He is scared he will lose the only real home he has had for the past 15 years. He is scared that if we cannot even afford to buy food, then we surely cannot afford to keep him on. That does not give him the right to act that way. No, it does not. But being scared can make a man turn mean. You have seen this before. And Clara had. She had seen it in the mining camps and the logging towns, in kitchens all the way from here to Montana. Fear and an empty stomach always made men cruel. I do not have enough food to get us to Saturday, she told him in a quiet voice. Then we will make what we have last until then. How? Miguel gave her a small smile. You are not the only one around here who knows how to stretch a meal, Senora. My grandmother could feed 12 people with just 3 potatoes and a prayer. I will show you how. For the next 3 hours, Miguel showed Clara all the old tricks his grandmother had used back in Sonora. He taught her how to render every last bit of fat, how to soak the dried beans overnight so they would double in size, how to make the flour last longer by mixing it with cornmeal, and how to turn leftover vegetable peels into a hearty stock. They worked side by side in a comfortable quiet, and Clara felt something inside her begin to change. Maybe, just maybe, she was not all alone in this fight after all. Thursday's breakfast was nothing more than cornmeal mush with the very last of the honey drizzled on top. The men ate every bite without a single complaint. Lunch was a bean soup so thick you could stand a spoon up in it. Dinner was a potato hash with tiny bits of bacon so small they were more like a memory of meat than the real thing. With every single meal she served, Clara expected the men to finally revolt. But instead they just ate. And on Friday morning, when she served them fried mush with some sorghum syrup that Tommy had discovered in the back of the pantry, Charlie Moss started telling a story about how his mother used to make the very same thing during the war. We ate that every single day for 2 solid months, he said. I thought I would never be able to even look at it again. But this? He took another big bite. This tastes like she is right here with me. Frank Delaney never showed up for any of the meals. Clara did not bother to ask where he had gone. On Friday night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep, Ethan found her in the kitchen. The supply run is tomorrow morning, he said. I am taking the wagon into town. I'm going to need a list. Clara handed him 3 pages of items she had written out with great care, complete with quantities and what she figured the costs would be. He just stared down at the pages. This is very detailed. That is my job. Most cooks I have known just yell out what they need. Well, I am not most cooks. He folded up the papers and put them inside his coat pocket. Frank owes you an apology. Frank does not owe me a thing. He was telling the truth. I cannot fix what is wrong with this ranch by cooking food. But you still fed all of us, on next to nothing for 5 whole days. Ethan leaned up against the counter. Do you have any idea what that takes? It takes desperation. It takes skill. And it takes something else besides. He paused for a moment. My wife always used to say that cooking was the only honest work left in this world. You could not fake it. You could not pretend. The food you made either nourished people or it did not. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She sounds like she was a very smart woman. She was smart enough to marry me back when I had nothing to my name but this ranch and a big dream. He looked all around the kitchen. She passed away in this very room. A fever took her in just 3 days. I could not save her. There was not a single thing I could do but just stand there and watch her fade away. I am so sorry. Do not be. Just try to understand why this kitchen sat empty for so many years, why I just let it fall apart. It was because every single time I walked in here, I could see her dying all over again. He looked right into Clara's eyes. Until you came along. Now, when I walk in here, I can smell food cooking. I can hear people eating and talking. I feel like maybe this place is not just some tomb that I've been keeping up. Clara had no idea what to say to something like that. Ethan pushed himself off the counter. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow we are going to start all over fresh. He left, and Clara just stood there in the kitchen that had once belonged to a woman who was gone, feeling the heavy weight of expectations she had never once asked for. She had promised herself she would stay for 1 week. That week was almost over, and she did not have a clue what was supposed to happen next. Saturday morning came in cold and mean, the kind of cold that tells you bad weather is on its way. Ethan hitched up the wagon before the sun was even up, and Clara watched him from the kitchen window as he loaded up empty sacks in the cash box. Tommy came and stood beside her. The boss is taking Frank with him. Why would he do that? Because Frank needs to see for himself just how bad things really are, and how much money we are spending just to keep this place going. Tommy's voice got a little lower. This ranch is in trouble. Clara, real trouble. Ethan won't come right out and say it, but we all know this could be our last season if things don't get better. A knot formed in Clara's stomach. The last season? Cattle prices are in the dirt. Feed costs a fortune. We lost half the herd last winter when that blizzard blew through. The banks are starting to circle. And Ethan? Well, Tommy's voice faded. What about Ethan? He's got too much pride to ask for a lick of help. He's too stubborn to sell off any land. And he's too loyal to let any of us go, even when he can barely afford to keep us. Tommy looked her square in the eye. You coming here might be the only bit of good luck this ranch has seen in 3 years. Don't you go wasting it. He turned and left before she could say a word. Clara spent the whole morning getting ready for their return, cleaning and organizing, figuring out meals that could stretch the new supplies for as long as possible. She was elbow-deep in sourdough starter when Charlie Moss came barreling through the door. A storm is coming, he said, out of breath. A big one. The radio says it will hit by sundown. But it is only October. You tell that to the sky. Clara glanced out the window. The horizon had turned to bruised purple. Dark clouds were rolling in like an army on the march. Where is Ethan? Still in town. He ought to be. Back by 3 o'clock. Charlie pulled out his pocket watch. It is noon right now, if that storm gets here early. He did not have to finish the thought. Everybody knew what he meant. By 2 o'clock, the temperature had plunged 20 degrees. By 2:30, the first snowflake drifted down. They were big, wet, heavy flakes, the kind that meant business. The cowboys all gathered in the dining room, just staring out the windows, watching the long road. 3 o'clock came, and then it was gone. No sign of a wagon. 3:30. Miguel made the sign of the cross and whispered prayers in Spanish. 4 o'clock. The snow was coming down so hard now that Clara could not even see the barn from the house. They should have made it back by now, Pete said, saying what they were all thinking. The road is probably slow, Charlie offered, but his voice did not sound very convincing. 4:30, Tommy said as he stood up. I am riding out. You will freeze solid out there, Clara heard herself say. It is better than just sitting here while the boss dies. Nobody is dying, she said, but her own hands were trembling. Not if I can do anything about it. She walked over to the stove and got to work, heating up broth, wrapping fresh bread in cloth and filling thermoses with coffee, hot enough to burn a hole through leather. Her hands knew just what to do, even while her mind was screaming in panic. What are you doing? Miguel asked her. Making sure they have something warm when they get here, if they get here. When? Clara's voice was steady. Not if. When? At 5 o'clock, with the dark closing in and the storm howling like a wild animal, they finally heard it. The sound of wagon wheels, horses screaming, and men yelling. Everyone scrambled for the door. The wagon slid sideways into the yard, one wheel completely shattered, and supplies tumbled out into the snow. Ethan was slumped on the driver's bench with ice frozen in his beard and his hands stuck to the reins. Frank Delaney was hanging off the side, his face covered in blood and one arm hanging all wrong. Tommy and Miguel charged out into the blizzard. Clara grabbed the thermoses and ran right behind them. The cold hit her like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind right out of her, but she kept moving. She reached the wagon and pushed a thermos into Ethan's hands. "Drink," she ordered. "Frank, I see him. You drink first, then you can help." Ethan's hands were so frozen he could not even open the thermos. Clara twisted it open for him and held it to his lips. He drank, coughed, and then drank some more. "The wheel broke about 5 miles back," he managed to say, his teeth chattering. Frank jumped down to see if he could fix it. "A horse got spooked and kicked him. His arm is broken, maybe some ribs too." They managed to get Frank inside and settled both men near the fire. Clara went into action, getting hot water and clean rags. Miguel held Frank steady while she set his arm using torn strips from a bedsheet because they did not have any proper splints. Frank cried out once, and then he fainted. "Good," Clara mumbled. "This will be easier now." She wrapped his ribs tightly, cleaned the gash on his head, and made sure his breathing was even. Then she turned her attention to Ethan, who was sitting by the fire, trying his best not to shake to pieces. "Take off your coat." "I'm fine. You are half frozen. You either take that coat off or I will cut it off you." He was too cold to put up a fight. She stripped him down to his undershirt, piled blankets on him, and made him drink more of the hot coffee. His lips were turning blue. His hands would not stop shaking. "The supplies," he mumbled. "To heck with the supplies. You nearly died. We got most of it." The cowboys had already started dragging the sacks inside. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, beans, rice, dried meat, and lard. Everything that was on her list, and even a few things that were not. Clara felt hot tears sting her eyes. He had nearly died just to bring her groceries. "You are a fool," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, his teeth still chattering. "But you got your supplies." It was in that moment she understood this was not just about a job. This was not just her working off a debt. This was something else entirely, and it was something that scared her more than any storm ever could. The blizzard raged on for 3 whole days. Clara slept in a chair right by the fire, keeping watch over Frank Delaney's breathing, and Ethan Calloway's shivering under a pile of blankets that never seemed to get him warm enough. She had sent the other men to the bunkhouse with strict orders to stay inside and stay warm. But she could not bring herself to leave these two. She would not leave them. By the second morning, Frank's fever had shot up. "It is probably his ribs," Miguel said as he checked the bandages. "It could be an infection starting, or it might just be his body fighting the shock of the injury," Clara replied, pressing a cool, damp cloth to Frank's forehead. "Either way, we just need to keep him comfortable and watch him like a hawk. You should get some sleep, Senora. I will sleep when they are both out of the woods." Miguel left, and Clara was alone with 2 men, barely conscious, in a storm that just would not end. She boiled water and changed out bandages, and she managed to get some broth between Frank's lips whenever he was awake enough to swallow. Ethan would wake up from time to time, confused and talking nonsense, asking about the cattle and fences and all sorts of things that did not matter until he could stand on his own 2 feet. "Shh," Clara would tell him, gently pushing him back down. "You need to rest. I can't rest. There is work to do. The work can wait. But you cannot." On the 3rd day, Frank woke up with clear eyes, his mind sharp. "You are still here," he said, his voice as scratchy as gravel. "Where else would I be? I thought for sure I had run you off." Clara dipped a cloth in some cool water and wrung it out. "You certainly tried. I was wrong about you." He winced as he tried to move. "I said some awful things. You did not deserve any of that." "No, I did not. Are you going to make me beg you for forgiveness? I am going to make you get well so you can get back to your chores. This ranch needs you." Frank's eyes started to glisten. "It has been a long time since anybody said that to me." "Well, then the people around here are idiots." Clara straightened his blankets. "You have been on this ranch for 15 years. Charlie says that kind of loyalty means something. Loyalty does not pay the bills." "No, but it builds something that money cannot buy." Frank looked closely at her face. "Are you really planning on staying? The week is already over. I suppose I missed my chance to leave." Good. He closed his eyes. Because I have a feeling you might be the one thing that can save us all. I am just a cook, Frank. You keep telling yourself that. When Ethan finally woke up for good, with no fever and no confusion, just clear-eyed and aware, he saw Clara fast asleep in the chair. Her head was tilted at an angle that he knew would be painful when she woke up. He got to his feet slowly, testing his legs, and draped his own blanket over her shoulders. She did not even move. He just stood there for a good long while watching her sleep, and something inside his chest that had been cinched tight for 3 years finally came loose. This woman had saved his life, but it was more than that. She had brought his entire ranch back from the brink with nothing more than some flour and a whole lot of stubbornness. He did not know what to do with that feeling. He did not know what to do with the way his hands wanted to smooth back her hair, or the way his heart started to beat a little faster whenever she smiled, or the way he had started to listen for the sound of her voice in the kitchen, like it was the only sound in the world that mattered. You are staring. Clara's eyes were still shut. I did not mean to wake you, Ethan said. You did not. Your thinking is what woke me. It is loud. I did not know thinking made a sound. She opened her eyes and looked right at him. Really looked at him. The same way she did that first night in the kitchen when she insisted that he let her cook. You are on your feet. It appears so. How do you feel? Like I got kicked by every horse in the barn and then left for dead in a blizzard. He paused for a moment. But I feel alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to some coffee and a few blankets. Thanks to you for not letting me die. Ethan took a step closer. Why did you do it? You could have just stayed inside. You could have let the men take care of it. Because men do not always handle things the right way. Clara stood up, wincing as her neck complained. And besides, I already told you, I always pay my debts. You paid that debt about 5 meals ago. Well then, maybe I am staying for another reason. And what reason is that? Clara met his gaze. I have not quite figured that out yet. The storm finally gave up on the 4th day, leaving the entire ranch buried in snow right up to the top of the fence posts. The men got to work digging paths out, to the barn, to the bunkhouse, and to the animals that had all huddled together trying to stay warm. We lost 3 calves. 2 of the horses were sick with a cough. The chicken coop had collapsed under all the ice, but all the men were alive. The supplies were safe, and Clara's kitchen was warm and smelled like heaven. She cooked non-stop during those first few days after the storm. Hot meals to chase away the cold, sweet pastries to raise everyone's spirits, and hearty stews to build their strength back up. The cowboys ate like they had been starving for a decade instead of a few days. Frank Delaney was the last one to make it back to the dining table. He walked in slowly, his arm still in a sling and his ribs taped up tight, but he was walking on his own. All the men grew quiet as he came in. Frank stopped right in front of Clara. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. You already apologized. I did that when I was half dead and burning up with fever. I am doing it again now that I have my senses back. He took off his hat. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what you could do for this place. I was wrong for the way I treated you. And I am truly sorry. Clara put down the big serving spoon. Apology accepted. Just like that? What do you want from me, Frank? Blood? I want you to know that I mean it. And I want you to know that if any other man on this ranch ever disrespects you again, he will have to answer to me. The other cowboys sitting nearby shifted in their seats and nodded their heads in agreement. Clara felt that lump in her throat come back again. I appreciate that. You do a whole lot more than just cook, ma'am. You are the one holding all of us together, and that is worth more than all the gold in the world. He sat back down, and everyone went back to eating. But something in the room had changed. Something important. Later on that night, Charlie Moss found Clara out on the porch just watching the stars start to peek out from behind the clouds. You handled that situation with Frank real good, he said as he lit his pipe. I did not do anything. You forgave him. That is something. Charlie puffed a cloud of smoke into the cold night air. Do you know why he was so angry with you when you first got here? Fear? Is that what Miguel told you? Fear, yes, but it was more than just that. Frank lost his wife the very same year that Ethan lost his. It was different circumstances, of course. Frank's wife just up and ran off with a cattle buyer, but a loss is a loss all the same. When you showed up here cooking just like Sarah Calloway used to, bringing some life back into this old place, he trailed off. It just reminded him of everything that he had lost, everything that he knew he was never going to get back. Clara let that sink in. I had no idea. How could you have known? Frank does not ever talk about it. None of us really do. But this ranch is not just dying because of money troubles, Clara. It is dying because every single person here is grieving for something they have lost. Ethan's wife, Frank's marriage, Tommy's daddy who drank himself into an early grave, Miguel's family all the way back in Mexico that he cannot afford to go and visit, Pete's old dreams of having his own little spread someday. Charlie looked over at her. And even you. You are grieving something too, are not you? Clara's hands gripped the wooden porch railing tight. What on earth makes you say something like that? Because people who are always running from one place to the next are usually running away from something that they just cannot bring themselves to face. I'm not running. Are you not? Clara did not have an answer for him. Charlie tapped his pipe against the railing, knocking the ash out onto the ground. Whatever it is you are running from, well, it followed you all the way out here. Sooner or later, you are going to have to turn around and face it. The only question is whether you are going to do it all by yourself or with people who have come to care about you. He walked away, leaving her under a blanket of stars with nothing but the hard truth for company. The next morning, Ethan discovered her in the pantry, moving jars and sacks around. You looking for something? She asked, her back still to him. I'm looking to talk about our money situation. That made her stop. She turned around, a smudge of flour on her hands. What about it? The ranch finances. It's only right you know how things stand. I'm just the cook, Ethan. You're a hell of a lot more than that, and we both know it. Ethan slid a worn ledger from inside his coat. This whole place is about 3 months from going belly up. Maybe 4, if we're real careful. The bank is calling in a loan my daddy took out right before he passed. I've been making the interest payments, but now they want the whole dang principal. $15,000 by spring, or they take the land. Clara felt a cold knot form in her gut. 15,000. I've got about 3,000 put away, she said quietly. The cattle won't fetch near enough. Cost of feed has just eaten us alive, and now with all this storm damage... He shut the book with a thud. I'm telling you this because if you're aiming to stay, you ought to know what you're staying for. This might just be a sinking ship. Why don't you sell? To who? The ranch next door wants our land, but they'll offer pennies on the dollar. They won't pay enough to get me out of the red. I'd lose the whole spread and still be in debt. Ethan's jaw was tight. And I can't do that to my men. Some of them have been on this ranch for 20 years. This is their home, too. So what's your plan? Don't rightly have one just yet, but I'm working on it. Clara wiped her hands clean on her apron. Let me help. You're already helping more than enough. You're keeping us fed. No, I mean with the books. I've got a head for figures. I used to keep the ledgers for a big logging camp up in Oregon. Let me have a look. See if there's something you might have overlooked. Ethan paused for a long moment. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. She held out a steady hand. Let me help you, Ethan. He passed the heavy ledger to her. Clara spent the next 2 days buried in 3 years of the ranch's financial records, and what she uncovered made her feel sick to her stomach. You've been paying way too much for feed, she told Ethan on the 3rd morning. This supplier has been charging you double what it ought to cost. He's the only one within 50 miles. No, he's not. There's another fellow over in Abilene who'll deliver for half that price. I found his advertisement tucked inside an old newspaper in the pantry. Ethan just stared at the scrap of paper. How in the world did I miss this? Because you were drowning, Ethan. It's hard to spot a lifeline when you can barely keep your head above water. Clara tapped her finger on another line item. And right here, you're paying property taxes on land you don't even own anymore. According to the county records, this piece was sold off 4 years ago, but you're still getting the bill. Well, I'll be. The county's been swindling me. That's money you can get back. Maybe $500. They spent the whole afternoon poring over the books, finding one mistake after another. Overcharges, missed payments, lost chances. By sundown, Clara had found $1,200 in funds they could get back and figured out ways to cut their monthly spending by 30%. This doesn't fix everything, she said, her voice husky with exhaustion, but it buys us some time. Ethan looked at her as if she'd just parted the Red Sea. Where did you learn all this? My father was an accountant before the bottle got the best of him. He taught me my numbers before he even taught me my letters. Clara closed the ledger. Numbers don't lie, Ethan. People might, but the numbers always tell the truth. What else did he teach you? That men will take what they can from you if you let them. That trust has to be earned. It ain't just given away. And that the only person you can truly depend on is yourself. She paused. He was wrong about that last part, though, wasn't he? Yeah, Ethan said softly. Turns out sometimes you can count on a cowboy who'll bet on you, and a stubborn rancher who'd nearly get himself killed to bring you some flour. He reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. Clara's breath hitched in her throat. Thank you, he said, plain and simple. For what? For seeing all the things I was blind to. For caring about a place that isn't even yours. For staying put when you had every reason to run. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. For making me remember what hope feels like. Clara quickly pulled her hand away, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ethan, I know you're not looking for anything like this. Neither am I. But it seems to be happening all the same. Nothing's happening, she whispered. He stood up from the table. I think about you when I'm out there riding the fence line. I wonder what you're cooking up. I find myself listening for the sound of your voice. I haven't felt that way in 3 years, Clara. Haven't wanted to. But here we are. Here we are, she echoed with nothing else to say. I'm not asking for a thing. Not expecting it, neither. I just wanted you to know. He started for the door, then stopped and looked back. And Clara, whatever it is you're running from, Charlie's right. Sooner or later, you're going to have to turn and face it. When that day comes, you don't have to face it by yourself. He left her then, and Clara sat alone in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by account books and hard truths. She had come to Red Hollow to work off a debt. But somewhere down the line, she'd started building something new. Something that scared her more than going broke or getting lost in a blizzard or facing down angry cowboys. It was something that felt an awful lot like home. The following Sunday, Clara woke up to a kitchen that was empty and a house that was dead silent. Puzzled, she dressed in a hurry and stepped outside, only to find all 16 cowboys gathered near the old, weathered chapel up on the hill. Ethan was standing at the front of the group, holding his hat in his hands. Clara walked toward them slowly. What's going on? She whispered to Tommy. Boss called a meeting, said it was important. Ethan waited for Clara to join the circle before he began to speak. 3 years ago, I lost my wife in that house down there. I lost my faith right here in this chapel. And I lost the will to fight for anything more than just making it to the next day. His voice was steady and clear in the cold air. This ranch has been on a slow path to ruin ever since. Not just because of the money, though that's a big piece of it. It's because I gave up. I stopped being a leader. I stopped caring about anything except seeing the sun go down. The men shuffled their feet, looking uncomfortable with his raw honesty. Then a woman shows up on our doorstep with a carpet bag and a kind of grit I didn't understand. She cooked one single meal and everything started to change. Not the ranch itself, but us. We started to change. We started laughing again, eating our meals together, thinking about more than just the day's work. Ethan turned his gaze to Clara. She saved Frank's life, and she saved mine. She saved this ranch from going under by finding money I didn't even know we had. And she did all of it while asking for nothing in return but a chance to pay a debt that was already settled. Clara could feel hot tears sting in her eyes. So here's what I'm proposing, Ethan went on. We stop dying. We start fighting. We're going to fix the money problems, we're going to fix the fences, and we're going to fix the broken parts of ourselves we've all been ignoring. And we're going to do it together, as a ranch that's worth saving. How? Frank called out. The bank still wants its $15,000 come spring. We'll figure it out, but we'll do it as a team. No more one man trying to carry the whole load, no more giving up. Ethan's voice grew stronger. Red Hollow Ranch was built by my granddaddy with nothing more than a herd of cattle and a whole lot of hope. My daddy kept it going through drought and the Great Depression. And I'll be damned if I'm the Callaway who lets it die on my watch. A roar went up from the men. They were shouting, clapping their hands, and pledging their support. Clara stood off to the side, just watching, feeling something crack open and mend itself inside her all at once. Ethan found her after the crowd had broken up. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, he said. You didn't? Sure felt like you did. Clara turned to look him square in the eye. You want to know what I'm running from? Only if you're wanting to tell me. I had a daughter. The words spilled out of her before she could hold them back. She passed away when she was 3. Took by a fever, just like your wife. I couldn't save her. There was nothing I could do but sit there and watch her slip away. Clara's voice cracked. After she was gone, I couldn't stay put anywhere. Couldn't build a life, because everything I ever built just fell to pieces. Everyone I ever loved died, so I just kept moving, kept cooking, kept paying on debts that didn't need paying because it was easier than admitting I was just running from my own grief. Ethan didn't say a word. He didn't try to soothe her with platitudes. He gathered her into a firm embrace, letting her cry it all out against his shirt until the storm had passed. I am so sorry, she finally mumbled into the fabric. Don't you ever be sorry for hurting. It is me who should be. I was not straight with you, pretending I was only here to square a debt when the real truth was I had no other place to land. You are here now. That is all that counts. Clara eased back, brushing at her damp cheeks. I do not know how to stay put, Ethan. I do not know the first thing about building a life and trusting it will not all just crumble to dust. Neither do I, he admitted. But maybe that is something we can figure out side by side. What if I let you down? What if I cannot save this ranch? You already saved it, he said gently. Now, all we have to do is keep its heart beating. Clara's gaze drifted up to the little chapel, then down across the sprawling ranch, to the distant figures of the men at work. Okay, she said softly. Okay, I will stay. Not for a week, not to clear a debt, but because I want to. She met his eyes. Because maybe it is high time I stopped running. Ethan smiled. A real, honest-to-goodness smile that finally reached his eyes. Then let us get to work. They walked back down that hill together. Two people who had been carrying too much grief, now learning how to shoulder something lighter. Hope. Their first real test showed up 2 weeks later when the bank sent a man out. His name was Gerald Pritchard, and he rolled up in a buggy far too clean for our ranch roads, wearing a suit far too fancy for an honest day's work. From the kitchen window, Clara watched Ethan walk out to meet him, his shoulders squared up and his jaw set firm. This is not going to be good, Charlie muttered right beside her. How can you be so sure? Because banks do not send fellas in shiny suits to bring you happy news. Clara dried her hands on her apron and made her way to the door. Where do you think you are going? Charlie called out. To hear what the man has to say. This business concerns every last one of us. She stepped onto the porch just as Pritchard was pulling a stack of papers from his briefcase. "Mr. Calloway, I am afraid the bank's position has not shifted. We require payment in full by March 15th, or we will have no choice but to foreclose." "That is 4 months from now," Ethan said, his voice tight. "I already told your boss I am working on it." "Working on it is not a formal payment plan." Pritchard's eyes flickered over to Clara, then back to Ethan. "I see you have brought on additional staff. That is a peculiar decision for a ranch that claims to be in financial distress." "She is not additional staff, she is—" "I am an investment," Clara cut in, stepping right off the porch. "Mr. Calloway brought me on to reorganize the operations here and cut down on costs. In fact, we have already found $1,200 in recoverable funds and slashed the monthly expenses by 30%. Pritchard's eyebrows shot up. "Is that a fact?" "It is a fact. And we are putting new efficiency protocols in place that will raise our profit margins by the time spring rolls around." Clara folded her arms across her chest. "So, unless your bank is eager to foreclose on a ranch that is on the verge of turning a profit, I would suggest you give us the time we are asking for." Pritchard looked her up and down. "And who might you be, exactly?" "I am someone who knows that numbers do not lie, but banks certainly do." Clara held his stare. "Your fine institution has been overcharging Mr. Calloway on his interest for the past 3 years. We have the paperwork to prove it. We also have proof of some fraudulent tax assessments, so this is how it is going to be. You are going to take our payment proposal back to your superior, and you are going to strongly recommend he accepts it. Because if you do not, our next stop will be filing formal complaints with the State Banking Commission about your predatory lending practices." All the color washed right out of Pritchard's face. "That is a very serious accusation. This is a very serious situation." Clara took a step closer. "We are not asking for a handout. We are asking to be treated fairly. Can you provide that? Or should I start writing my letters to Austin?" Pritchard snapped his briefcase shut with a sharp click. "I will relay your proposal to my superiors." "You do that," she said. "And Mr. Pritchard?" Clara gave him a smile that held no warmth at all. "Next time you decide to visit, come hungry. I will make sure you get a proper meal. It might help you remember we are people out here, not just figures in your account book." He took off in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Ethan just stared at Clara. What in the world just happened? "I called his bluff," she said. "Banks cannot stand scrutiny. They hate it even more than they love money." She turned and started walking back inside. "He will be back with a better offer inside of a week." "How are you so certain?" "Because I know men like him. They are all thunder and no rain. They prey on folks who they think will not fight back." Clara paused at the doorway. "But we are fighting back now." Charlie was grinning from ear to ear when she walked into the kitchen. "Now, that was really something." "That was reckless," Clara corrected him. "I just went and threatened a banker. He could make our lives a living hell. Or," Charlie's grin got even wider, "he could give us exactly what we need. Either way, watching you stand up to that stuffed shirt was worth the price of admission." 3 days later, a telegram came. It offered them new terms, a lower interest rate, a payment deadline pushed all the way to June, and a formal apology for the errors in the tax assessment. Ethan had to read it twice. "You were right. I generally am. People just have a habit of not listening." Clara took the telegram from his hand. "But this just buys us some time. We still have to bring in some serious money." "I have been giving that some thought." Ethan spread a map out on the table. "There is a big cattle drive forming up in Wichita Falls next month. A major outfit heading for the railheads in Kansas. They are paying top dollar for good drovers and quality beef." "How much is top dollar?" "Enough to make a real dent. Maybe $2,000 if we send our best stock and I ride along with them." Clara's stomach felt like it dropped to the floor. You are going on the drive? I have to. They will not pay a premium price unless the owner's there to vouch for his own cattle. How long will you be gone? 6 weeks, could be 8, all depending on the weather. That is 2 months. I know, Ethan met her gaze. But it is our best chance to see some real money before spring gets here. Clara wanted to protest, to tell him it was far too dangerous, too long a time, too big a risk. But she knew the ranching life better than that. Sometimes you had to be willing to bet everything just to save anything. Then we had better get you ready, she said, her voice steady. What do you need? The next 3 weeks were pure, organized chaos. Ethan and Frank picked out 40 head of their finest cattle. Miguel and Pete were busy repairing saddles and all the tack. Tommy and the younger hands spent their days practicing their roping and branding skills. Clara cooked meals big enough to put some weight on men who would soon be living on nothing but jerky and hardtack for 2 long months. She also made plans. While you are away, I am going to reorganize the winter operations, she told Ethan one night as they sat over coffee. The cattle we are keeping here need better feed management. I found a supplier who is willing to trade us hay for beef at a fair rate. And Charlie told me about a vegetable farmer near Abilene who might want to partner up with us for the spring planting. You are planning to build a farm on a cattle ranch? I am diversifying our income streams, she explained. Cattle prices go up and down. Food prices tend to stay steady. If we can start producing vegetables for the towns nearby, we can create a reliable source of revenue that does not depend on the whims of the market. Ethan just shook his head, looking amazed. Where did you learn all this about economics? From watching men lose everything they had by betting it all on one crop, one mine, or one cattle season. Clara poured more coffee into his cup. My father lost 3 separate fortunes by gambling on things he was told were sure things. I learned you never put all your eggs in one basket. Did your father teach you that? No, she said quietly. His failures did. The night before the drive, Clara found she could not sleep. She stood out on the porch watching the light from the bunkhouse where Ethan and the drovers were getting their gear ready, and her chest felt tight with an emotion she could not quite name. It felt like fear, but maybe it was something worse. He will be all right, you know. So she turned to see Frank standing beside her, his arm finally out of its sling. I know, Clara said. Then why do you look like you are on your way to a funeral? Because 2 months is a long time. A lot can happen. Frank lit a cigarette. A lot can happen in 2 minutes. You cannot live your life scared of what might be. That is easy for you to say. Is it? Frank blew out a stream of smoke. I spent 15 years being scared of everything after my wife up and left. Scared to trust anyone, scared to have any hope, scared to care about a single thing because caring meant you were just risking more pain. He looked straight at her. Then you showed up and scared me more than ever. Do you know why? Why? Because you made me remember what I had been missing all that time. You reminded me that living scared is not really living at all. Frank flicked the ash from his cigarette into the dirt. The boss is coming back, Clara. And when he does, you two are going to have to sort out what this thing between you really is. There is no thing. You keep telling yourself that. He left her standing there alone with the stars, and a truth she was not ready to face. Morning arrived far too quickly. The drovers gathered in the yard. It was Ethan, Frank, Miguel, and 2 hands they had borrowed from a neighboring ranch. 40 head of cattle shuffled around in the holding pen, restless for the long walk north. Clara brought out hot coffee and freshly baked bread, watching as Ethan checked his saddle for the 3rd time. You have got everything? She asked him. I think so. Money belt? Got it. And extra socks, Clara. Laudanum in case one of the boys gets hurt. Yes, Mother, Ethan said with a small smile. We will be fine. You had better be. I did not just reorganize this entire ranch for you to go and die on a cattle drive. I would not dream of it. They just stood there for a moment, a silence stretching between them, neither one knowing what to say. Finally, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled something out. "I found this among my wife's things. I thought you might like to have it." It was a recipe card. The handwriting faded from time. Peach cobbler, Sarah Calloway's original recipe. Clara's throat felt tight. "I cannot take this." "Yes, you can. She would have wanted someone to use it. Someone who cares about feeding people the same way she did." Ethan gently pressed the card into her hand. "Keep the ranch running while I am gone. Keep the men fed and keep them focused. And Clara?" "Yeah?" "Do not run. Promise me you will not run away." Clara looked down at the recipe card, then up at this man who had somehow become as necessary as breathing, then out at the ranch that had stopped feeling like a job and had started to feel like home. "I promise," she whispered. "I promise," she. Ethan swung up onto his horse. The drovers started moving, the cattle followed, and a cloud of dust rose to meet the morning sun. Clara stood in the yard, watching until they were just a speck on the horizon, clutching a dead woman's recipe, and wondering when she had started caring so much that it actually hurt. "Well," Charlie said from behind her, "I guess it is just us for a while." "I guess so. You are really staying then?" Clara carefully folded the recipe card. "I made a promise, didn't I? Promises are easy to make. Keeping them is the hard part." "Well then, I reckon we're about to find out what I'm made of." The first week Ethan was gone felt strange. The ranch was too empty, too quiet, like a vital piece of it was missing. Clara poured all her energy into her work, cooking and planning and organizing, pushing the men who stayed behind to keep up their standards even though they were short-handed. She started a vegetable garden behind the cookhouse with seeds she'd ordered from a mail-order catalog. She even got Charlie to help her build some cold frames so they could grow vegetables in the winter. She struck a deal with that farmer over in Abilene to trade fresh beef for seed and equipment. The men watched her take charge with a kind of wonder. "She's like a general," Tommy remarked one evening, "drawing up battle plans and strategies." "No," Charlie corrected him gently. "She's like someone who's finally decided to stop running." On the 10th day, a visitor arrived. She pulled up in a hired buggy, a woman dressed head to toe in black with a face that looked like it was carved from cold marble. Clara was out in her garden when Charlie called her over. "This here is Mrs. Victoria Ashford," he said, his voice tense. "She's here to see you." The woman looked Clara up and down with eyes that didn't miss a single detail. "So you're the cook I've been hearing so much about." "I'm Clara Whitmore. Can I help you with something?" "Perhaps. I own the ranch that borders Red Hollow. 3,000 acres, twice the size of Mr. Calloway's operation." Victoria's smile was thin and cold. "I'm here to make you an offer." "I'm not the owner, ma'am. Mr. Calloway is away on a cattle drive. He won't be back for another 6 weeks. I'm well aware of that, which is why I've come to speak with you." Victoria produced a folded document from her purse. "I am prepared to offer $8,000 for Red Hollow Ranch. Cash. Today." Clara's heart just about stopped beating. "That's not enough to cover his debts." "It's enough for him to walk away without owing another dime. The bank would accept a partial payment to release its claim. Mr. Calloway could start over somewhere new. This is his home. This is a failing business that's pulling him under." Victoria's voice softened just a little. "I'm not trying to swindle him, Miss Whitmore. I'm offering him a way out before he loses everything." "And what about the fellas? What becomes of them? I would keep most of them. Good ranch hands are hard to come by." Clara's gaze fell on the document, on the number that stood for everything Ethan had fought for, everything his family had poured their lives into. $8,000. It was not enough. It would never be enough. "I cannot accept this for him," Clara said, her words coming out slow. "But I will make sure he sees your offer when he comes home. Do not take too long. This offer is only good for 30 days. Victoria hoisted herself back into her buggy. "And Miss Whitmore, whatever it is you believe you are building out here, it will not last. This ranch is finished. You are just too bull-headed to admit it." With that, she was gone, leaving Clara holding a piece of paper that could either fix everything or tear it all down. That evening, she called a meeting. All the hands that were left gathered in the dining room. Charlie, Tommy, Pete, and 6 others. Clara laid the whole situation out for them, plain as day. The offer, the time limit, the decision they had to make. "We could tell Ethan to sell," she said. "Just walk away from it all. Start fresh somewhere else." "Or," Tommy asked, "or we could prove Victoria Ashford wrong. We could make this ranch turn a profit before Ethan even gets back. We can show him that this place is worth fighting for." Charlie leaned back in his chair. "And how in the world are we supposed to do that in 6 weeks? By working harder than we ever have in our lives. By putting every single one of our smart ideas to work. By getting that vegetable garden partnership up and running and bringing in some hard cash before spring." Clara looked each man in the eye. "By deciding right here and now that Red Hollow Ranch is worth saving." "I am in," Tommy said without a second's hesitation. "Me too," Pete chimed in. One after another, the men all voiced their agreement. Charlie was the last one. "You know this is a long shot," he said. "I know. And you know Ethan might ride back in here and decide to sell the place anyway. I know that too. Then why are we fighting so hard?" Clara thought about the recipe card tucked in her pocket. About the look in Ethan's eyes when he made her promise not to run. About how this place had somehow become her home when she was not even looking. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you are scared. Even when the odds are stacked against you. Even when it would be a whole lot easier to just quit. She stood up straighter. "So, we fight. And we do not stop fighting until we have won, or until there is nothing left to fight for." The men roared in agreement, and Clara Whitmore, a woman who had spent 10 years running from every important thing in her life, finally planted her feet firm and held her ground. The next 6 weeks were a real grind. They worked from sunup to sundown, and sometimes even longer. They planted vegetables in the frozen dirt using old tricks Miguel's grandmother had taught him. They put up a smokehouse to cure meat they could sell. They struck deals with 3 different towns for regular food deliveries. They even started a small dairy with 4 cows nobody thought were worth a dime. Clara cooked, she organized, she planned, and she pushed. The men grumbled about the hard work, but they did it. Money began to trickle in. It was not much, just small amounts, but it was steady. Victoria Ashford sent over 2 more offers, each one higher than the last. Clara threw them in the fire without reading past the first sentence. "You are crazy," Charlie told her after she burned the 3rd one. "Probably. What if we fail? Then we fail while trying. That is a whole lot more than we were doing before." 4 weeks into their plan, disaster hit. The dairy cows got into some bad feed and 2 of them died. The vegetable crop was nearly wiped out by an early frost. One of their biggest delivery deals fell apart when the customer found someone who would sell cheaper. Clara stood in the kitchen long after midnight, wrestling with numbers that just would not behave, and she felt that old familiar pull to just run. Simply pack a bag, walk away, and leave the whole mess for someone else to sort out. But then she pictured Ethan's face, recalling his plea for her to stay. She remembered the little headstone she had left behind once before, because turning and running was so much easier than remembering. "No," she whispered to the silent kitchen. "Not this time." She took out Sarah Calloway's recipe card and traced the faded, looping script. 3 cups of peaches, 1 cup of sugar, butter, cinnamon, and love. Love. Sarah had actually written that down, as if love was an ingredient you could measure. A laugh escaped Clara's lips before it turned into a sob, and then she wiped her eyes and set her jaw. The next day, she persuaded Charlie to butcher one of their older steers and help her turn it into jerky for sale. She got Pete to teach her the art of leatherworking so they could mend tack for cash. She had Tommy start breaking horses for the neighboring ranches to branch out, to adapt, to survive. By the 5th week, they had earned $1,700. It was not enough to save the ranch on its own, but added to what Ethan was meant to bring back from the cattle drive. It was a chance, a real fighting chance. On the morning of the 6th week, Clara stood in the kitchen before the sun was even thinking about rising. Clara was rolling out biscuit dough and keeping one eye on the road. Any day now, Ethan would be coming home. Any day now, she was going to have to tell him about Victoria's offers, about the money they had made, and about the choices that were sitting there waiting for them. Any day now, she would have to look at whatever this thing between them truly was. The kitchen door creaked open. Clara turned, flour on her hands, and a knot of hope in her throat. But it was not Ethan. It was a telegram. Charlie stood in the doorway, his face pale, holding that piece of paper like it was a coiled snake. "What is it?" Clara asked. But a part of her already knew. She could feel it in the sudden chill that snaked its way into the room. "There was an accident," Charlie said, his voice starting to crack. "A stampede just outside of Dodge City. 3 men were hurt and 2 were gone." Clara felt like she could not get a breath. "Ethan!" "The telegram does not say who, just that there are casualties and the drive is delayed." Charlie's hand was shaking. "It says more news is on the way." The lump of biscuit dough slid from Clara's fingers and hit the wooden floor with a soft thud. She just stood there, frozen, as her whole world started to tilt on its side. And everything she had worked for, every promise she had kept, every little bit of hope she had let herself feel, was now hanging on a piece of paper that did not say nearly enough. Tommy came bursting through the door. "Is it true about the drive?" "We don't know a thing for certain yet," Charlie said, but his voice did not have much fight in it. Clara finally found her own. "Saddle a horse." "What?" "Saddle a horse. I am riding to Dodge City. That is 3 days of hard riding. You will kill yourself." "Then I will die trying." Clara untied her apron and let it fall. "I am not just going to sit here wondering if he is alive or dead. I am not running this time. I am fighting." She grabbed her coat and marched toward the door. Behind her, Charlie called out, "What are we supposed to tell the men?" Clara stopped and turned back to face him. "You tell them the truth. Tell them we do not know. And you tell them we keep working until we hear different." Her voice turned to steel. Voice turned to, "And you tell them that Red Hollow Ranch does not quit. Not for banks, not for pushy neighbors, and not for death itself." She walked out into the cold morning air toward the barn, toward a horse that would carry her to some answers, toward whatever was waiting in Dodge City, and toward the truth she had been running from for her whole life. That love meant putting everything on the line, and she was finally, truly, ready to risk it all. Clara rode for 3 days, only stopping when the horse needed rest. And when she finally trotted into Dodge City, her hands were covered in blisters, and her eyes were burning from the dust, the exhaustion, and the fear. The stockyard looked like its own dusty city, with pens full of cattle and drovers milling about everywhere. The air smelled of animals and money. She slid off her horse on legs that felt like they would not hold her up, and she grabbed the first cowboy she laid eyes on. "The stampede. Where are the men who made it?" He pointed toward a building on the edge of the yards. "The doctor has them in there, but lady, you do not want to go in." Clara was already running. The building was 1 part hospital and 1 part pure chaos. Injured men were laid out on cots, a doctor was shouting orders, and the whole place smelled of blood and carbolic acid. She scanned the room, her heart pounding so loud it was like a drum in her ears. Frank Delaney was sitting in a corner, his arm wrapped in a fresh bandage, his face gray from the pain. Miguel was lying on a cot, out cold but still breathing. But there was no Ethan. Clara's vision narrowed to a tunnel. "Frank, where is he?" Frank looked up at her, and the look on his face told her everything she needed to know even before he opened his mouth. "He is alive." The relief hit her so hard it nearly brought her to her knees. "But he is bad, Clara. Real bad." She found him in a small back room. He was alone except for a nurse who was changing the bandages on his chest. His shirt was gone. His whole torso was wrapped in white cloth that was already seeping red in places. His face was so pale he might have been dead, if not for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The nurse looked up. "Are you family?" "Close enough." Clara walked over to the bedside. "What happened?" "The herd spooked from a lightning strike. The cattle just ran over anything in their path. He was trying to turn them. His horse was shot out from under him. He went down hard. Took a hoof to the ribs, broke some, I reckon. He was trampled pretty bad. Lost a lot of blood before we could get to him." "Will he live?" The nurse paused for a moment. "Maybe, if infection does not set in, if his lungs do not fill up with fluid, if he is strong enough to fight it." "He is strong enough." Clara took Ethan's hand in hers. It felt cold. "He is the strongest man I know." The nurse left the two of them alone. Clara sat beside that bed and held his hand and whispered things she had never dared to say out loud. She made promises and confessions, and she sent prayers up to a God she was not even sure was listening anymore. Hours crawled by. Frank came in after a while. "The drive boss says we got the cattle through, sold them for a good price. Should be about $3,000 after we pay all the expenses." "I do not care about the money." "You should. It is what he nearly died for." Frank sat down heavily. "He was trying to save a kid. The youngest drover got thrown from his horse when the stampede hit. Ethan went back for him. That is why he was in the path of the cattle. That is why he went down." "Did the kid make it?" "Yeah. Walked away with just a few bruises. Ethan here took the hit that was meant for him." Frank's voice broke. "Always the hero. Always thinking about everybody else. Never himself." Clara squeezed Ethan's hand. "Wake up, you stubborn fool. Wake up and tell me what happened yourself. Do not make me sit here and guess." There was nothing. Just the sound of his shallow breathing and the sharp smell of blood and medicine in the air. Frank got to his feet. "I am headed back to the ranch with Miguel tomorrow. Somebody has to tell the men what happened." "Are you staying?" "For as long as it takes." "What about the ranch?" "Charlie can handle it. The men can handle it. They have been getting along just fine without me for 3 days already." Clara met Frank's gaze. "I am not leaving him." "What if he does not wake up? Then I will be here when he dies. But I am betting on him waking up." Frank left, and Clara was alone again with Ethan and the heavy silence. She talked to him all through the night. She told him about the ranch, about the money they had made, about Victoria Ashford's offers, about the garden and the dairy and the deals she had cut. She told him about how loyal the men were, about Tommy's silly bet, about Charlie's good sense. She told him about her daughter, about the guilt she had carried around for 10 long years, about how she had blamed herself for not being able to save her baby girl, and how that blame made her run, because staying put meant facing the truth that some things just cannot be saved, no matter how hard you fight. "But I am done running," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Even if you do not make it, even if I lose you too, I am staying at Red Hollow. I am fighting for that ranch because it is worth fighting for, because the men are worth it, because you taught me that some things are more important than just protecting yourself from getting hurt." His hand twitched in hers. Clara's breath caught in her chest. "Ethan?" His eyes opened slowly. They were unfocused and full of confusion. "Clara, I am here. You rode all the way to Dodge City. 3 days of hard riding. I nearly killed the horse and myself. That is stupid. Yeah, well, I learned from the best." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "How do you feel?" "Like I got run over by 40 head of cattle." "That is because you did." Ethan tried to smile, but winced from the pain. "The kid, Tommy's cousin, is he alive?" "He is, thanks to you. The cattle sold $3,000. That is good. It is not good enough. Not. It is not worth your life." Ethan's eyes finally focused on her face. "You have been crying." "No. Your eyes are red. That is just dust." "Clara," she finally broke. Yes, I have been crying. I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you before I ever got the chance to tell you. She trailed off. Tell me what? Clara looked at this man who had pulled her from a broken wagon, given her a second chance, trusted her with his whole ranch, and made her promise she would not run away. This man who had almost died saving a boy he hardly knew. This stubborn, loyal, impossibly good man who had somehow become the very reason she had finally stopped running. Tell you that I love you, she said, plain and simple. That I am tired of pretending that I do not. That I want to stay at Red Hollow, not because I owe you a thing, but because I cannot imagine being any place else, with anyone else. Ethan's eyes started to look wet. You love me? I love you, and it scares me to death, but I am done letting fear make my choices for me. I love you too. I have since you threatened to cut my coat off me when I was half frozen. Clara let out a laugh that was mixed with tears. That is when you knew? That is when I finally admitted it to myself. But I have been falling for you since that first night you cooked supper. He gave her hand a squeeze. Do not leave. I am not leaving. Not now. Not ever. Promise? I promise? They stayed just like that, with their hands clasped together and their foreheads touching, just breathing together, until the doctor came in and kicked Clara out so Ethan could get some real rest. His recovery took 2 long weeks. 2 weeks of Clara staying in a boarding house close to the stockyards, visiting Ethan twice a day and watching him heal slowly and stubbornly. Miguel got better much faster and was let go after a week. Frank's arm had to be reset, but it mended up just fine. The money from the cattle drive was wired to the bank back in Red Hollow. Clara sent telegrams to Charlie to keep him updated. Ethan alive, healing, coming home soon. Charlie sent telegrams back. Ranch is running smooth, money coming in steady. Victoria Ashford made another offer. The men told me to tell that woman to go to hell. Clara smiled when she read that one. On the 15th day, the doctor finally cleared Ethan for travel. You take it slow, he warned. Those ribs are not all the way healed. You strain them and you will be right back in here or worse. You understand? Understood. I mean it, Calloway. Your woman here tells me you possess a stubborn streak. But even a stubborn man can die if he is a fool. Ethan's eyes found Clara's. My woman? Clara felt the heat rise in her cheeks. I may have introduced myself in that manner. Good. Ethan sat up slowly. Because that is what you are to me, if you will have me. I have already told you I would. I mean, officially, with spoken vows and witnesses and everything that makes it true and lasting. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Ethan Calloway, are you proposing to me in a doctor's office in the middle of Dodge City? Would you prefer that I wait until we are back home? I would prefer you do not get killed before you can ask me properly. Then I will ask you properly the moment we return to Red Hollow. But you should know, Clara Whitmore, I intend to marry you as soon as I can stand, without my ribs screaming in protest. As soon as we have saved the ranch. As soon as you say yes. Yes. I have not asked yet. You just announced that you were going to. I am saying yes now, before you get trampled again and I lose my chance. Ethan gathered her into a careful embrace, mindful of his tender ribs. We are getting married. We are getting married, and we are staying at Red Hollow and staying at Red Hollow together. The ride home took 5 long days because Ethan was too sore for hard travel. They rode in a wagon Clara had rented, moving slow, and they talked about everything and nothing at all. They talked about how they would put the cattle drive money together with what Clara had earned to pay off the bank. They talked about how they would make the vegetable operation bigger come springtime. They talked about how they would rebuild the ranch into something that could last, something that did not rise and fall with cattle prices alone. And they talked about how they would get married in the little chapel on the hill where Ethan's parents had gotten married, where he had buried his first wife, where new beginnings could happen right alongside old endings. Sarah would have liked you, Ethan said on the 3rd day. She would have loved that you used her recipe, that you are taking care of the men just like she always did. I am not trying to be her. I know you are not trying to replace anybody, you are Clara. That is more than enough. When Red Hollow Ranch finally came into sight on the afternoon of the 5th day, Clara started crying all over again. The place looked different. It was not just cleaner or more organized, but it was very much alive. Cowboys were out working the fields and smoke was curling up from the cookhouse. There were new fences, and the buildings looked repaired. A little garden had somehow made it through the frost, and there, standing in the yard, were all 16 men, waiting. Charlie, Tommy, Pete, Miguel, Frank, and even the hired hands who had stayed on to help. They let out a cheer when the wagon rolled in. "The boss man is home," Tommy shouted. "And he brought Clara back with him," another man hollered. Ethan got down from the wagon slowly, wincing with every move. The men swarmed him, being careful not to cause him any more pain, but they were all eager to put a hand on him, just to make sure he was real and breathing. Clara hung back, just watching, until Charlie pulled her into a big, rough hug. "You did real good, girl, real good. We all did good. No, you did good. We were just following your lead." The party went on long into the night. Clara did the cooking. Of course, she cooked. She whipped up a feast from the supplies she had left behind and the new stock the men had gathered. There was fried chicken and cornbread, a big pot of stew, and a cobbler made from Sarah's own recipe. The men ate like they had been starving for a month. Clara knew Charlie had been feeding them just fine. But this was not about the food. This was about being a family again, about celebrating that they had survived. It was about knowing they had all fought for something important and had won. After supper, Ethan carefully pushed himself up to his feet and cleared his throat. "I have got a few things to say." The room fell silent. "First, the money from the cattle drive, plus what Clara and the men earned while I was gone, comes out to about $5,000. Now, that is not enough to pay the bank off completely, but it is enough to get them to rework the loan. We are not out of the trouble yet, but we are not beaten either." The men all nodded. "Second thing, Frank, Miguel, you two nearly died for this place. You are both getting bonuses. It is not much, but it is something." Frank just shook his head. "Do not need a bonus. I just need to know we all get to stay. We are staying. Every last one of us, for as long as you want to call this place home." Ethan took a breath. "And that brings me to my third point. I am making this ranch a partnership. Not on some legal piece of paper, but in our hearts. What we build from here on out, we build it together. What we earn, we will share it. This is not just my ranch anymore. It is ours." A wave of shock went through the men. "Boss, you cannot do that," Tommy said. "I can, and I am. This place only works if we all care about it, if we all fight for it. You all proved that while I was gone." "So are we doing this together or not at all?" Charlie raised his coffee cup high. "To Red Hollow, to Red Hollow," the other men echoed. Ethan held up one hand. "Just one more thing. Clara and I are getting married." The room absolutely exploded. Men were whooping and slapping the tables, all of them demanding to know the details. Clara felt herself getting pulled into one hug after another, shaking hands, and hearing congratulations that felt both overwhelming and absolutely perfect. "So when is the wedding?" Pete shouted from across the room. "As soon as the preacher can get himself out here," Ethan answered. "As soon as Ethan can stand up without falling flat on his face," Clara corrected with a smile. "As soon as Clara stops being so stubborn about letting me stand up. So it is the same thing then. Never." A wave of laughter rolled through the dining room, sounding like music. Later on, after the men had all gone to the bunkhouse, the kitchen was clean and the fire was burning low, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch, just watching the stars. "Do you really want to marry me?" Clara asked in a quiet voice. "More than I have wanted anything in a long, long time. Even though I am a difficult woman. Especially because you are difficult. Easy women are boring." Clara laughed. "What about the ranch? What happens if we cannot save it?" Then we will have tried to save it together. And that is a whole lot more than I had before you came here. Ethan took her hand in his. But we are going to save it. I know we are. How can you know that? Because you are too darn stubborn to let it fail, and I am too darn stubborn to let you down. 3 weeks later, they got married in the little chapel on the hill. Charlie was the one to give Clara away. Frank stood up there as Ethan's best man. The preacher from town came to perform the ceremony. All 16 of the cowboys were there, all cleaned up and looking almost respectable. Clara wore a simple dress she had made with her own 2 hands. Ethan wore his best suit, his ribs still taped up, but they were healing. When the preacher asked if she took this man, Clara said, "I do," without a moment of hesitation. When he asked Ethan the same question, Ethan's voice came out strong and sure. "I do." They kissed while the cowboys cheered and whistled, and afterward they had a feast, because of course they had a feast. Clara had spent 2 whole days cooking every single thing she knew how to make. The tables were groaning under the weight of all that food. The men ate until they could not move. Somebody pulled out a fiddle. There was dancing and singing in a kind of joy that the ranch had not seen in many years. As the sun started to set, Ethan pulled Clara away from the crowd. "I am happy. I am terrified. But I am happy." Is that a good terrified or a bad terrified? A good terrified. The kind that means I finally care about something enough to be scared of losing it. Ethan kissed her on the forehead. "You are not losing this. You are not losing me. We are building something that is going to last. Promise. I promise." That first year was hard. They paid down a good chunk of the bank loan, but they did not clear it. They built the vegetable garden into an operation that made some money, but it did not make them wealthy. They lost some cattle to the winter and the drought, but not enough to break them. They made mistakes, and they fixed them, and they learned. Clara cooked and managed the books and made the plans. Ethan led the men and worked hard and trusted her. The men all stayed loyal. The ranch survived. By the second year, they were making a profit. They were not rich, but they were stable. The banks stopped breathing down their necks. Victoria Ashford stopped sending letters with offers. The cattle market got better, and by the third year, Clara was pregnant. She stood in the very same kitchen she had first cleaned 3 years ago, with her hand on her growing belly. She felt a mix of fear and hope, both in equal measure. "What if something happens?" she asked Ethan one night. "But what if nothing happens? What if everything goes perfectly right?" That is not how life works. No, but it is how faith works. And you were the one who taught me that. Ethan knelt down beside her. "You taught me that caring about something means you are risking pain, that staying put means you have to face your fears, that building something worthwhile means you have to believe it is not all going to fall to pieces. I am scared." "Me too, but we are scared together, and that makes it bearable." Their daughter was born in the spring. She was healthy and strong, with her mother's determination and her father's stubborn streak. They named her Sarah Grace, for Ethan's first wife, the one who taught him about love, and for Clara's first daughter, the one who taught her about loss, and for the grace that had somehow brought them both together. Clara held her new baby in the kitchen where it had all started and felt like the circle was finally complete. She had first come to Red Hollow because she owed a debt. She had stayed because she made a promise. She had built a home because she had found love. And now she held the future in her arms, a future she had been too afraid to even imagine. "Thank you," she whispered to the little baby sleeping in her arms. "For what?" Ethan asked from the doorway. "For being alive, for being right here, for giving me a reason to keep on fighting." Ethan walked over to them and wrapped his arms around his wife and his daughter. "We all keep fighting. That is what families do." Outside the window, the ranch was breathing with the rhythm of work and life and purpose. You could hear the cowboys laughing, the cattle lowing, and the chickens clucking. The garden was growing, and the future was unfolding right before them. Red Hollow Ranch had been dying when Clara Whitmore showed up with nothing but a carpet bag and a whole lot of determination. It had been saved by fried chicken and stubbornness and love. But it was more than that. It was saved by people who decided that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. They were worth staying for, even when running away would have been easier. They were worth building, even when it all could have fallen apart. And as Clara stood in that kitchen holding her daughter, surrounded by the life she had built from nothing but flour and faith, she finally understood what home really meant. It was not a place you just find. It was a place you fight for, a place you earn, a place you refuse to give up on, no matter how scared you might be. And Red Hollow Ranch, with its transformed kitchen, its loyal men, its stubborn owner, and its cook who had finally learned how to stay, was at last completely and undeniably home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.